important to come in here and say, not only are we removing guns and gang members and robbers and firearms, we are removing an entire coordinated section of gang violence permanently off the streets. And that's how you deliver a victory for the people of Philadelphia, the people of Pennsylvania, and the people of America.
Our message to the drug traffickers is get the hell out of our country. Your free ride is over because President Trump is back in the Oval Office.
The fentanyl crisis plaguing communities and destroying lives from coast to coast. Over the past few weeks, we've looked into why the death toll is escalating and the root causes of this nationwide problem. Tonight, we examine how exactly fentanyl is actually getting into...
At 4 a.m., while the city slept, the war began. A quiet Thursday morning turned into the largest coordinated federal strike in America's recent history. Across 22 cities, teams of agents moved under the cover of darkness. Streets were empty, lights were off, but inside unmarked vans, commands were whispered and doors were seconds away from being broken down. By sunrise, over 5,000 suspects were in custody. Truckloads of drugs, weapons, and cash were hauled out of basements and warehouses across the country. The numbers alone were staggering. Billions in fentanyl and methamphetamine seized in a single day. On the surface, it looked like victory, the government's biggest blow yet against the cartels. But behind the flashing lights and breaking news banners, a darker truth was already emerging. This wasn't just a war on the cartels. It was a war that had crept inside the very institutions meant to stop them. They called it the Surge, a mission to choke the arteries of America's drug empire. But as investigators dug deeper, they uncovered something far more dangerous than drugs. The real enemy wasn't across the border. It was buried deep within the system itself. Stay with me, because what happened next changes everything. If you believe America's war on drugs is far from over, hit like. If you think the truth deserves to be heard, share this video. And if you want to see what really happened after the surge, tap subscribe, because what comes next will make you question everything you thought you knew. The Sinaloa and CJNG cartels are not street gangs. They are multinational empires built on chemicals, blood, and silence. From the outside, they look like chaos, violence in Mexico, overdoses in America. But inside, their structure is corporate. Chemists, accountants, transport managers, and armed enforcement units working with military precision. Their product is not just narcotics, it's death, manufactured and distributed like an industrial commodity. And at the heart of this empire lies one city, Chicago. Chicago isn't just a city on the map, it's America's crossroads. Rail lines, trucking routes, airports, and interstate corridors all converging in one place. Every road that connects east to west, every freight line that cuts across the country, they all pass through Chicago. That's why the cartels made it their beating heart. The drugs move in, the money moves out, and both flow through the same veins. The numbers are almost impossible to grasp. More than 100,000 Americans die every year from overdoses. Nearly 70% of those deaths are linked to fentanyl, a chemical so potent that 2 milligrams, smaller than a grain of sand, can stop a human heart. The supply chain is global and disturbingly efficient. Chemicals from China and India, labeled as harmless industrial solvents, are shipped to super labs in Mexico. There, chemists mix, press, and package millions of counterfeit pills designed to look like prescription medication, oxycodone, Xanax, Adderall, but laced with enough fentanyl to kill. From those labs, the product crosses the border hidden inside farm trucks, freight containers, and even migrant convoys. Once inside the U.S., it's routed through logistics hubs like Chicago, Houston, and Los Angeles, broken into smaller shipments, and pushed into every corner of the country, from Indiana high schools to New York nightclubs. But the real genius of the cartels isn't just in moving drugs, it's in moving money. Cash collected from American streets is laundered through a maze of shell companies, trucking firms, and cryptocurrency exchanges. It flows through offshore accounts before returning as legitimate capital, funding real estate projects, car dealerships, nightclubs, even political campaigns. It's not just crime anymore. It's a shadow economy one built on addiction, silence, and profit. The deeper investigators looked, the clearer the picture became. This wasn't a drug epidemic. It was a business model. One built to survive, adapt, and infect every system it touched. They called it the Surge. A synchronized national strike designed to choke the arteries of America's drug empire, one that had been years in the making. It began quietly, with months of intelligence gathering inside DEA headquarters. Agents studied patterns, shipments, bank transfers, encrypted messages, piece by piece, building a map of an invisible machine. Every cartel cell in the United States was part of the same structure, using identical stash houses, shell corporations, and cash routes. Once the data was clear, the truth was undeniable. The cartels weren't just operating inside America, they were thriving here. On October 15th, at 4 a.m., the silence broke. Across 22 U.S. cities, the operation launched in perfect synchrony. Helicopters sliced through the early morning air, armored trucks rolled through quiet neighborhoods. In Chicago, Phoenix, Houston, Los Angeles, and Miami, agents from the DEA, FBI, and Homeland Security stormed hundreds of properties at once. Doors shattered. Flashbangs lit up the dark. Inside suburban homes, warehouses, and storage units, agents uncovered the infrastructure of a modern war. Industrial pill presses, chemical drums, stacks of unmarked cash, and crates of high-powered weapons. In 1 week alone, over 2,500 suspects linked to the Sinaloa cartel were in custody. Agents seized $85 million in cash, entire networks of couriers, chemists, and financial brokers. Dozens of super labs were dismantled, each capable of producing millions of fentanyl pills a month. But the mission didn't stop there. 3 weeks later came Phase 2, a full-scale strike against the CJNG cartel, known for expansion through violence and fear. This time, the battlefield widened. At the port of Long Beach, federal agents halted entire cargo operations. Containers labeled as cleaning supplies were pried open to reveal tons of chemical precursors, the lifeblood of fentanyl production. In Miami, investigators raided luxury condos and marinas tied to cryptocurrency laundering networks. In Houston, convoys of semi-trucks were intercepted on Interstate 10, crates of vegetables hiding military-grade firearms bound for cartel enforcers. By the time the dust settled, over 5,000 suspects were in custody. The seizures totaled over $200 million in narcotics, cash, and weapons. Dozens of command nodes were dismantled. Entire cartel supply lines collapsed overnight. For a moment, it felt like victory. But beneath the celebration, agents began to notice something chilling. Some of the people in handcuffs weren't traffickers at all. They were sheriffs, border inspectors, even federal officers. The war had crossed a line. The enemy wasn't just at the border anymore. It was inside the system. As agents sifted through the wreckage of the surge, the headlines called it a clean sweep, a victory against the cartels. But inside the war rooms, the mood was anything but victorious, because among the 5,000 people arrested, there were names no one expected to see. Sheriffs, border inspectors, federal officers, men and women sworn to protect the country had been caught protecting its enemies. What began as a drug investigation had quietly uncovered something darker, a web of corruption that reached deep into the system itself. It wasn't random, it was organized. The cartels weren't just smuggling drugs, they were buying silence. Bribes no longer came in envelopes. They came disguised as contracts, campaign donations, property deals, and consulting fees. Dirty money flowed through the same shell companies that laundered cartel cash, looping back into police budgets, local elections, and union funds. The same accounts that financed gun shipments were also paying city contractors. In El Paso, a border protection officer used his badge to wave through trucks loaded with narcotics and undocumented migrants. In Arizona, an internal affairs report revealed supervisors burying evidence to protect colleagues on the take. These weren't isolated betrayals. They were part of an ecosystem. The pressure to staff up after the border crisis had flooded agencies with thousands of new recruits. Background checks were shortened, oversight weakened. Federal funds poured into local departments with almost no scrutiny. The result was predictable: more boots on the ground, but cracks in the shield. By the end of 2025, the statistics were impossible to ignore. Dozens of law enforcement officers, from county deputies to senior federal agents, were under indictment for cartel ties. The cartels had stopped bribing individuals. They were feeding the bureaucracy itself. For the DEA and the FBI's corruption unit, the question changed. The threat wasn't just across the border anymore. The real question was darker. How do you defend the badge when the rot is growing from within it? And that question would lead to the most controversial decision in modern U.S. policy, one that would turn a drug war into a counter-terror campaign. The evidence was overwhelming. The cartels weren't just criminal networks anymore. They were terrorist organizations, using fear, finance, and infiltration to destabilize an entire nation. Inside the White House, the decision came swiftly and quietly. Through an executive order, the U.S. government officially designated the Sinaloa and CJNG cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. That single document changed everything. Within minutes, the Pentagon gained authority to work directly alongside the DEA and Homeland Security. Intelligence sharing expanded. Military-grade surveillance systems were activated inside U.S. borders. The lines between law enforcement and national defense began to blur. The Secretary of Defense called it a whole-of-government counter-terror campaign. The message to the cartels was clear. If you operate like insurgents, we will treat you like insurgents. We will map your networks. We will find you, and we will eliminate you. For the first time, U.S. Northern Command was authorized to provide operational support on American soil. Drone reconnaissance, cyber tracking, and satellite imaging, tools once reserved for the battlefield, were now focused on cartel strongholds. Drug enforcement stopped being about policing. It became a war plan. The objective was no longer to arrest. It was to destroy. The global target list expanded overnight. Cartel financiers in Spain, chemical suppliers in China, crypto launderers in Dubai. American agents were no longer chasing suspects. They were dismantling an international ecosystem. But even as operations intensified, one truth became impossible to ignore. The deeper they dug, the more corruption they found, and the more fragile the system protecting America became. Because for every trafficker arrested, another official was exposed. For every victory announced, another scandal leaked. The cartels had already crossed the border. Now the question was, could America win a war it was fighting inside itself? When the dust settled, America celebrated the numbers: 5,000 arrests, more than $200 million in drugs and weapons seized, dozens of cartel networks dismantled. But beneath the applause, a quiet unease remained. Because the surge wasn't just about shutting down drug routes. It exposed something deeper, a system stretched to its limits. A nation fighting enemies both foreign and domestic. The cartels had evolved, but so had the cost of confronting them. Over 150 Americans still die every single day from overdoses tied to fentanyl and synthetic opioids. The drugs are cheap. The chemistry is simple. The supply never stops. And the corruption uncovered during the strike has left scars that no amount of arrests can erase. The victory was real, but fragile. Faith in the badge had been shaken. Trust in the system was fractured. And the line between justice and survival has never felt thinner. Yet amid the chaos, one truth stands firm. When good men and women refuse to look away, darkness loses its grip. Agents, analysts, soldiers, and officers stood between order and collapse, and they chose to fight. The surge was more than an operation. It was a warning that evil doesn't need permission to grow, only silence. And for once, America did not stay silent. So now the question belongs to you. Do we keep fighting this war? Do we demand stronger borders, stronger accountability, and stronger protection for our communities? Or do we let the system crack from within? If you believe this fight must continue, hit like. If you stand with the agents who still wear the badge with honor, share this story. And if you want to see what happens next in America's silent war, tap subscribe, because the truth is only just beginning to surface.